Welcome, my friends, and everyone interested in this ancient text called the Bible. Today we are in John 11, and this is when the shit really hits the fan for Jesus' mission. It's also where we find the very famous verse, Jesus wept. Yes, we are about to embark on the story, the event that shifts things, that brings the religious elite to their breaking point when it comes to Jesus and his ministry. The Bible is about to get very real. We might get a little bit colorful, as we already have. So buckle up and welcome to Dumb Christian. Okay, John 11. Jesus has been snowballing through Israel, especially in Jerusalem, really like making waves, drawing a lot of attention to himself in some good ways, but mostly in bad ways. People are unhappy with the message that Jesus has, with the attention he's getting, with the following that he's getting. The people are like leaving these other synagogues, these churches in droves to follow Jesus. They're not listening to the famous rabbis and sages that everyone else is listening to. They want to listen to Jesus because there's something about him. He speaks with authority, truth, grace, love, power, and he doesn't just have words, but he has something to show, to validate, to back up what he's saying. Miracles, where he heals the blind, he raises the lame to give them a walk, he turns water into wine, he calms storms, and here we see the final miracle that Jesus performs in the book of John. And at the beginning of John chapter 11, we are introduced to three people: Lazarus, Martha, and Mary. And what's about to happen is going to topple the system. And the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the religious elite have been growing in their disdain for Jesus, their frustration, and finally they get to the point where they say, we've got to put an end to this. We cannot let Jesus go on any longer. And it has to do with Lazarus, Martha, and Mary. Interestingly enough, the story we're about to unpack is only found in the book of John. And I'm not really sure why, because this story is actually kind of the catalyst that sets things in motion, which leads Jesus to, spoiler alert, the cross. And John introduces us to Martha, Mary, Lazarus. He tells us, hey, Mary is the one who washed Jesus' feet with her hair and expensive perfume oil. We've never met these people up to this point in John's gospel. So he's either referencing maybe a story they've heard in one of the other gospels, because you can hear elsewhere about Mary washing Jesus' feet. Or he's giving like a foreshadow in like a weird way. Like this already happened, but I'll tell you about it later. I don't know. And then he also introduces us to Lazarus. He was a pillar. He seemed to have been a pillar in the community. A respected man in the synagogue. He helped out, led fundraisers and did food drives and helped out with the community carnival and everything like that. And when the original readers would have read Lazarus, I imagine there's some gasping. I've heard this story. I knew Lazarus. Okay. No, I don't want to ruin it for you, but I know what happens. There's a plot twist. There's a little bit of an M. Night Shyamalan feel to this story if you haven't heard it yet. Yeah, that's the conversation going around this story when the original readers pick up John's gospel. And John tells us that Jesus loved Martha and Mary, and he loved Lazarus. But the word here for love that John uses to describe how Jesus was affectionate towards Martha and Mary is agape. And this is a unique word for love, only found in the Bible, and it's used to define God's type of love. Not a love based on emotions, not a love based on merit, not a love based on, what you've done to earn it, but just God's love because he chooses to love. And this is how fond Jesus is of Martha and Mary. He has God's kind of love for them. There is some speculation. Maybe you've heard about the Da Vinci's Code of cheating systems in mathematics. And anyway, there's this, right, like some lore that Jesus and Mary really secretly had a romantic relationship and hooked up. But we don't see that anywhere in the Bible. And when it does talk about Jesus' relationship with Mary, it uses the word agape, not eros or romantic, erotic, or sexual attraction. It's a very different word. And then the word that John uses to describe how Jesus feels about Lazarus is the word philo. It's a different word. It's a word that we use reference to, like Philadelphia, right? The city of brotherly love, because the Greek word is often identified as meaning brotherly affection. But if you really get into the Greek word, philo is a lot deeper than that. It's like this kindred spirit, like a deep longing, a deep love for. It's not erotic, it's not romantic, it's not sexual, but it is this deep soul connection, philo. It's the kind of love that Jonathan and David shared when they said, oh man, this is the best, this is the greatest love that we could experience. That type of love, philo. They must have grown up together. Maybe they were childhood friends and, they went to each other's bat mitzvahs. I don't remember if it's bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah. One's for a boy, one's for a girl. And it doesn't matter. But they are intimate, deep friends. And we see that Jesus has some deep feelings and emotions when he's processing what happens in this story. And as the story goes, Lazarus is sick. He's very, very sick. And Martha and Mary send messengers out. Go track down Jesus, find out where he is, and let him know his best friend, one of his best friends ever, one of his BFFs from childhood, is sick and dying. I don't know how long it takes them to find Jesus because they don't necessarily know exactly where he is. They don't have the Find Me app on, 360 Life or whatever it's called to track him down. They're looking for him and they have to investigate. Where is this Jesus fella? They finally find him and they say, Jesus, Martha and Mary have requested that you come to them because Lazarus is sick. He's in a really bad shape. And then they head back, the messengers head back to Martha and Mary. But this Bible, John's account here says something very interesting. It says, because Lazarus was sick, Jesus waited 2 more days. And this is a really weird thing to put at the beginning of the story. Because Lazarus is sick and dying, Jesus waited to go visit them. That's going to be really key to remember here in a little bit when Martha and Mary scold Jesus for not coming on time. Yeah, so that'll be a little bit interesting. And after 2 days, Jesus looks at his crew. All right, guys, pack up your crap. We are going back to Judea. We're going to Bethany, which is where Martha, Mary, and Lazarus have a little bit of an acreage just outside the town of Bethany. All right, we're going back to Judea. Let's go. And the disciples are like, whoa. Hold your horses, Jesus. We just came from Judea not that long ago. Remember when they tried to kill you? They tried to stone you? You've been banned from the bar, bro. We can't go back. That's bad news. And Jesus responds with this weird phrase. He says, while there's daylight, we better do the work we have to do. Jesus has identified himself in a number of different ways. The Good Shepherd, living water, bread of life, and light of the world. And he's saying, yeah, I realize that we're in hot water back there. I realize they're not too happy to see us. And I realize that it's going to cause some tension and some problems. And there are some things in Scripture that tell us Jesus knew what was coming down the line. He knew he was going to die. I don't know if he knew everything that was going to happen to him leading up to his death. A lot happens. And he says, I know what's coming down the line, but we have work to do. I'm not here, me, Jesus, the light of the world. I'm not here in the world just so that we can hide in the dark. We've got work to do, so let's do work. So they pack up, head to Bethany, and the disciples like, all right, I guess. And then Jesus says, let's go wake up Lazarus. Now, when Jesus waited 2 more days, instead of responding to the immediate plea for him to come help, the disciples are probably thinking, Jesus knows what he's doing. He's a smart guy. Lazarus's illness must not be as bad as the messengers made it out to be. So, yeah, I guess it's not that bad. Jesus says, let's go wake up Lazarus. They're thinking, oh, he must be resting to recover. So I guess we're going to go see him and hope he gets better. I don't know what they're thinking, but they say, well, if he's resting, he'll wake up. And Jesus says, okay, let me just spell this out to you guys, because I feel like you're being willfully ignorant. Like you're not paying attention to what I'm saying. He's dead. And then Thomas, who we frequently refer to as Doubting Thomas, gives this incredible statement, and he says, then let's go die with him. There are a few instances in Scripture where I have heard preachers try to extrapolate and make sermons out of weird phrases and sayings, and I've heard sermons on this. Let's go die with him. And sometimes I think, and look, maybe it's in here for some weird reason, and I'm just not spiritually mature enough to be able to discern what it is, or smart enough to figure out a clever way to explain why it's in the Bible. But sometimes I think the Bible just records things because that's just the dumb shit people say sometimes. And the Bible doesn't pretend like, hey, these people had it figured out. It's like, no, they're on a journey to try and figure out this crazy thing too. And I don't know about you, but I have had plenty of instances in my life where I thought it was really smart and clever and spiritual to say something, and I'd open my mouth, and then later that night I'd be like, why did I say that? And here we have a picture of someone besides Peter, because we give Peter a hard time because he opens his mouth frequently, but here's Thomas. Let's go die with Lazarus. What are you talking about, bro? Who invited you? Why did you say that? And if for no other reason, I just appreciate the fact that when people say stupid stuff, the Bible doesn't pretend like they didn't. Anyway, so that's in there for whatever reason. I like that reason. It's just because that's what he said. Anyway, so they head to Bethany. I don't know how long it takes them to get to Bethany. They finally show up. They arrive, and Lazarus died 4 days earlier. He has been buried in the tomb. And part of this burial process is so that you don't necessarily stink, they coat you, because of like decay and rot and everything, they put a lot of herbs, spices, perfume all on the body, and then they wrap all of those herbs, spices, and perfume very tightly with linen cloths, strips of cloth. And so that it keeps it all compact and it keeps it all together. And then they lie this, basically it's a mummy. It looks like a mummy. They haven't been mummified, like preserved, but they're wrapped like a mummy. And they're laid in a tomb, which is typically like a carved out cave, a very small cave, just big enough to lay a body in. And then they roll a large stone in front of the entrance, so that people can't steal the body, but also so that the smell of death and decay doesn't overwhelm everybody who's around. He's been dead for 4 days, but like I said, he's a pillar in the community. So everyone from town, friends and family have come to see him, pay their respects, and comfort Martha and Mary. There's a lot of people here. Jesus and his crew stroll in late, and there's murmuring going on as he walks through the crowd, and people are whispering, "Oh, this is Jesus. He's the guy who opened the eyes of the blind. He healed the lame. Too bad he wasn't here earlier. I bet he could have healed Lazarus too. Martha meets Jesus as he walks on to the property. And she says, Lord, I'm heartbroken. I am devastated. Anybody know what that's like? And there's this really interesting encounter that Jesus has with Martha. He doesn't tell her to suck it up. He doesn't tell her she's being foolish. He doesn't tell her she's not trusting in God. She doesn't say, well, it was his time. Or he doesn't say, God needed another angel in heaven. He says, yeah, me too. This really sucks. In this story, we have a really intimate encounter with Jesus as we see a very private conversation that he has with Martha. This isn't something he's having out loud publicly. It's not a lesson he's teaching. It's a private conversation he's having with Martha. And then she scolds him a little bit. And she says, if you were here, he would have been fine. You could have healed him. And Jesus doesn't rebuke her. He doesn't deny it. He just says, yeah. Then Mary comes up and we hear a private conversation with Mary. And she scolds him. Jesus, if you were here, you could have healed him. And he doesn't correct her. He doesn't deny it. It sounds like, even from the way that Jesus talks in the story, read the story, it's written much better than I'm explaining it. So read the story, but when you read it, it almost sounds like Jesus is saying, yeah, I know. If I were here, I would have healed him. But this event, something is going to happen now that will cast away any second guesses, any uncertainties that anyone might have that I'm not the Christ that God promised, that I'm not the Son of God, that I am not God himself. Because this whole deal, it occurred so that everyone knows God the Father is my only priority. All I want to do in this life is to point people to the Father and show people that they've misunderstood, that he's not just this angry old guy waiting to snuff people out, but that the Father loves his children, that the Father loves you. And so he says, show me where he's buried. And then it tells us in two different instances here. It says that Jesus was grieved in his spirit, like wrecked to the core of his being. And this is where we get that famous verse, John 11:35. Jesus wept. Another one of these like verses where I've heard pastors and preachers try to make a sermon around this verse. And it's like, maybe he was just sad. Maybe Jesus just felt despair and the pain of loss and the death of one of his best friends. Maybe Jesus just needed a good cry. Anybody know what that's like? And he's here interacting with Martha and Mary, and they're weeping together. They're all broken at this. And he looks at them and he says, do you believe that your brother will live again? And Martha says, yeah, I know in the end, we're all going to live with God. I guess that brings me some comfort. And Jesus says, no, look at me. I am resurrection. I am life. And it's this like picture where Jesus is speaking directly into this hurt place that Martha is struggling with, that Martha and Mary are both struggling with. It sets the tone. It really gives, I think, this picture for Jesus, the way Jesus responds when anyone cries out and says, Jesus, help me. And he says, I am. Jesus, heal me. And he says, I am. Jesus, I'm alone. Please be with me. I am resurrection and life. It's not this thing that's going to happen miraculously someday. It is who I am. And then Jesus does this really incredible thing. He doesn't pull a Yoda moment, right? Where he's like twists his face and he conjures up the force and he reaches out with all of his strength. No, he just clears his throat and yells out, Lazarus, get your ass out here. And there's this awkward silence because everyone was either whispering to themselves, comforting each other, and Jesus shouts and everyone stops what they're doing and they look at Jesus and they think this guy's crazy. And then they slowly turn and look at the entrance to the tomb. The stone had been moved away. And they're waiting silently. What's going to happen? And then someone shrieks as this shadowy figure begins to appear in the doorway. And this mummy kind of like shimmies and shuffles out because remember, the cloth is wrapped tightly around the body of this man who had been dead and is now alive, responding to Jesus' call, come out of the tomb, Lazarus. And everyone's just shocked, their jaws on the floor. And Jesus is like, well, somebody help him. Don't just stand there. And I imagine, like, think about this. Like, this guy's been dead for 4 days. And you're one of the few people who went to help remove the cloth. And you're like, what am I going to see underneath? He wasn't a zombie. He wasn't the living dead. He wasn't walking while his flesh was falling off of his body. No, he was resurrected, restored, renewed, given that life once again. Can you imagine, like, if you were Lazarus and you were like hanging out with God and the angels, and then all of a sudden you hear this voice, Lazarus, get out here. And you're like, dang it. And you have to go back to earth. And he does. He comes back to life. And I mean, the initial shock had to have been terrifying to people, right? Like, this is not something you see ever. And it's a resurrection. This is Jesus, by the way, subtly planting the hint at I'm resurrection. Remember that. In a couple weeks. Yeah. Not in a couple weeks, our time, in a couple weeks, Bible time. Yeah, because some shit's going to go down in a couple weeks. And here is Lazarus alive again. And so this massive crowd that had been gathered for a funeral turns into a massive party, a celebration, a rager with glow sticks and strobe lights, and everyone is just, yeah, Jesus, yeah, Jesus. And they are partying like it's year 99. Yeah. During the party, while everyone is just laughing and celebrating and drinking and telling stories and just hanging on Jesus' every word, and everyone wants to touch Lazarus. Everyone wants to smell him. Wow, his skin is fresh, baby fresh. And then Mary kind of interrupts this whole scene. She brings with her this very large container of extremely expensive and fragrant perfume. She breaks this jar. She pours the oil perfume on Jesus' feet. Now, this is like another record scratch moment, like, what? And everyone stops what they're doing. The music dies. Everyone goes silent, and they're just watching this scene of Mary pouring oil on Jesus' feet, perfume, oil, and then wiping his feet with her hair. I have not been able to find out if there's any like ancient Jewish tradition behind wiping someone's feet with your hair or even using your hair as a washcloth. But there's something there. And she's crying. You ever feel like, man, I want to do something really important, but it feels awkward and weird, and it might make other people feel uncomfortable, and it might disrupt the flow, and I don't want to look like an idiot. I can't imagine that Mary was thinking anything but, I have to do this. I don't care how awkward it is or uncomfortable it makes other people feel. I have to do this. And I don't know if she knew what she was doing, but Jesus says, she's preparing me for burial. I'm going to die soon. And there are a few people who are really disgruntled with the events that are taking place. For the most part, everyone is like hella hype and excited. They're super overjoyed at resurrection. And, once people kind of like get past the awkwardness of what Mary's doing, I think everyone kind of puts their heads in the right place and says, yeah, we should be worshiping Jesus. But Judas and a few others aren't convinced. Judas is one of Jesus' 12 disciples. Jesus picked him to be a student, and he's been with Jesus the whole time. But he's not happy about this. Judas, along with the other people who aren't too happy, really kind of set their minds against Jesus. And a few people who were there for the funeral turned party aren't convinced that what is happening is a good thing. They see it as a bad thing. So what they do is they go tattletale on Jesus to the Pharisees who have been looking for Jesus. Remember, they kicked him out. They banished him. They go tattletale and they say, Pharisees, Jesus has resurrected. He's evolved from turning water into wine, into healing, into resurrection, literally bringing someone back from the dead. And instead of thinking, oh, wow, maybe we should hear what this guy has to say, they think he is ruining what we've got here. Everyone is going after him. Why aren't people attending our parties? They just want to go to Jesus's parties. We have got to put an end to this. And there's this weird thing that happens at the end of this story, which is kind of like in the beginning of chapter 12. It says, the Pharisees began to plot how to kill Jesus and Lazarus, because we can't have people telling this story of a man that has been raised from the dead. And the way this story ends, it's like one of those cliffhangers where the camera slowly zooms into the joy of the party that Jesus is having with his friends, and then it pans over and slowly zooms into this like menacing scowl on Judas's face, and we cut the scene to where the Pharisees are plotting against Jesus, and then it fades to black with "to be continued," because that is John chapter 11 and the first part of John chapter 12, and everything is about to just get crazy and chaotic with Jesus as he continues to press in to what God has for him, the work that needs to be done while he's here. That is the Bible, and I have been your host, Jonathan the Dumb Christian. I love you guys. Next time. There it is, the breaking point for the Pharisees. Now they are on a mission to end Jesus, even kill Lazarus once again. Be sure to check out our YouTube, Dumb Christian Podcast. We have exclusive content on there. Be sure to hit subscribe, like, ring the bell so you know when new content is dropped. I love you guys. I'll catch you later.